Okay, hi everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today for this important discussion. I'm Jessica Stewart. I'm the Executive Director of FACSIAR, the Family and Community Services Insights Analysis and Research Directorate in the Department of Communities and Justice. This month's Lunch and Learn research seminar is on making it easier for Aboriginal communities to access and use New South Wales child protection and out-of-home care data. This is a really critical component of the work we're doing to deliver on the National Agreement on Closing the Gap around Priority Reform 4 on Indigenous data sovereignty and Indigenous data governance. Before we begin, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that wherever we're joining from today's webinar, we're living and working on Aboriginal land that was never ceded. I'd like to personally acknowledge the Barramadigal people, who are the owners and First Nations people of the area where I have the privilege of joining you from today. And I'd also like to pay my respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, past and present, and to future and emerging leaders. And I'd like to extend that respect to our Aboriginal colleagues joining us today. I'd also like to warmly welcome all of you. Again, we've had a fantastic response to this month's Lunch and Learn with more than 800 people registering from a broad range of organisations, universities, government departments, which just shows the importance of this topic to all of you. Today's webinar will update our webinar that we held in June 2024. We'll be discussing data sharing with Aboriginal communities, including the role of our data connector, and the data connector role plays in this process. We'll also present updates on data that's available in our public Aboriginal-led dashboard for child protection and out-of-home care data, which will be followed by a presentation on the New South Wales Closing the Gap Target 12 quarterly report, which aims to reduce the overrepresentation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and young people in out-of-home care. At the end of the presentations, we will have time for a short Q&A if time permits. So please just make sure that you use the chat function to make any comments and questions, and either they will get answered in the chat or I will come to those at the end. And so for now, I would like to introduce our presenters for this afternoon. Maelona Stephens is a proud Yuin woman and Principal Implementation Officer working under Priority Reform 4 of Closing the Gap on data sharing with Aboriginal communities. Maelona has a background in psychology and criminology and has been working with DCJ since 2019. Maelona was part of DCJ's former Naramanala, our Aboriginal Knowledge Program team, and continues to lead its legacy work in embedding the principles of Indigenous data sovereignty and Indigenous data governance in the work right across DCJ. Hendra Santoso. Hendra Santoso is our Senior Analyst in the Child Protection Reporting team within FACSIAR. Hendra brings a wealth of public sector experience and a strong passion for improving outcomes for communities. Today, Hendra will showcase an innovative dashboard that makes important child safety, child protection and out-of-home care data more accessible and meaningful for Aboriginal communities in New South Wales. And finally, we have Kodjakorn Watsanawinatchai, Acting Senior Analyst in the Performance Monitoring and Development team within FACSIAR, leading performance reporting and framework design across child protection, out-of-home care, housing and homelessness. Kodjakorn began her career in the New South Wales Government Graduate Program with DCJ and New South Wales Treasury, and holds a Bachelor of Psychology with honours alongside postgrad qualifications in accounting and finance. So a very warm welcome to Maelona, Hendra and Kodjakorn. And I also want to let everybody know that this session will be recorded and posted up on our FACSIAR webpage. So anyone that's registered for the webinar will receive that link within about 1 week. So I'll now turn to our first speaker. Thank you so much, and please go ahead, Maelona.
Thanks, Jess. So I'm just doing a quick presentation on how we're making it easier for Aboriginal communities to access and use New South Wales child protection out-of-home care data through the New South Wales Data Connector service, which sits under Closing the Gap Priority Reform 4. So the Data Connector service was established in 2023, and it's been established to support Aboriginal communities and organisations to access government-held data. So in DCJ, there's myself on the community side, and I've got a counterpart who sits in Boxer and is responsible for the justice data. And we're also part of a broader network of data connectors who sit across the various New South Wales government agencies. And so those positions support Aboriginal data requesters to understand their data needs, to develop and refine data requests, and then help to find and access that data, and also offer support to use and interpret the data where necessary. So sharing access to data supports transparency and government accountability. And it also enables Aboriginal communities to make informed decisions in developing local solutions to local issues. Aboriginal communities and organisations access government-held data for a range of reasons. It may be to understand need and explain observations in their communities, to support with service planning, delivery and improvement, to assist with monitoring and evaluation, for allocating funding and developing business cases, and for community advocacy and government accountability. So on the community side of DCJ, we've facilitated almost 40 requests for data and information from Aboriginal communities and organisations. Requests are primarily focused on child protection and out-of-home care data. But to give you a few examples of the data that we facilitated access to for Aboriginal data requesters, there's been child protection data, including concern and risk of significant harm reports, mandatory reporters, children seen by DCJ caseworkers, emergency removals, caseworker vacancies, and family-led decision-making. The out-of-home care data, including entries to care, guardianship orders, restoration, exiting care and exit pathways, and case management of Aboriginal children across NGOs, ACOs and DCJ. There's been early intervention and family preservation data requests that have involved the case management, program participation, service referrals and use. Housing data, including social, Aboriginal and community housing households, the bedrooms, family types, housing utilisation and underutilisation, overcrowded and appropriately housed dwellings. There's homelessness data, including service provision, referrals and unmet need, funding data for ACO, NGO and DCJ service delivery. And for most requests, they're at a local level, and that may be at a DCJ district, LGA, suburb, postcode, service provider level. And then we've also reported some of our data at community defined boundary levels. And moving into Hendra's presentation, he'll speak a bit about the update to the Aboriginal-led dashboard, where we partnered with Newswalk, the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council, to incorporate the Newswalk region and LAC boundaries into the dashboard. And with that, I'll hand over to Hendra.
Thanks, Maelona. Just going to take control of this. Okay. Hi, everyone. So my name is Hendra. So I did this presentation about 2 years ago, which Jessica mentioned in the Lunch and Learn. So before we go into the actual dashboard, I'd just like to sort of share this slide as well, which is give you a bit of context about the timeline of this dashboard. So I kind of talked about it, like I like the word evolution. I think this has come through a lot of phases. So it started in 2015 with the guiding principles Yarning Circle. So that was created to partner with grandmothers against removal. So from then on, I think the first version was introduced in 2023. So kind of a soft release back in January 2022. So the first version was publicly released in February 2023, as I mentioned. And throughout the years, in 3 years from now, it has changed quite significantly over the years. So this is the first version of the dashboard, as you can see. So it is a one-page summary. where the latest year was in 2021-22. I believe it's a 4-year time series at that time when it was being released, and has got 4 themes. So one of them is the population rates in the New South Wales child protection system. Second is keeping Aboriginal children safe from harm. Third is partnerships with Aboriginal families and kin. And fourth is the safety and well-being of Aboriginal children in care. So as you can see, this is a one summary, which summarizes all of these key measures. So version 2, so as you can see, it's slightly modified. I think it's kind of a major sort of uplift in terms of accessibility and the use of these key structure in terms of the 5 elements of the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Child Placement Principle. So we seek permission from OOHC to use this because I think they are very visually it's very attractive, and it's kind of like symbolize every single element. And this is it's a framework that was actually developed by Snake. So the 5 elements or themes of this is, the first one is prevention, second is partnership, third is placement, fourth is participation, and fifth is connection. So the purpose of this is to support policies and practices to reduce overrepresentation of Aboriginal children in the child protection system. So I'm just going to quickly sort of skim through this because I do appreciate that some of you may want to go into the most fun product on the website. So there's, as you can see, there's version 3 and 4 where we are continually adding new measures into it. Version 5 that which is the current one. Actually, it's quite a significant milestone on for DCJ, is that we're able to present measures by the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council regions and councils. And some of these things, I think this is available for you to have a look at later on. So it gives you a bit of a summary of all the measures that are sort of categorized within each theme. And I won't go through much details. So this one here is the one that's latest publicly released recently. So this is basically we're presenting in the geographical regions by regions, as well as the local Aboriginal Land Councils areas. So the measures include some of the key things, which is really important. So with the ROSH reports and the children reported at ROSH, how many were seen in this, these regions, the children entering as well as the first time entry of out-of-home care, children exiting out-of-home care, which is a really important one, Aboriginal placement principle, which is commonly sort of released in the OOHC as well. As well as the children out-of-home care, statutory out-of-home care with the guardianship orders, which is one of the permanency exits for out-of-home care. So I'm just going to stop sharing here and go to the actual website. Okay. So this is our DCJ website. DCJ.newsouthwales.gov.au is the actual link. If you go into the About Us on the right-hand side here, you can see the families and community statistics. So scroll down, you'll see the annual statistical report is one of the annual report that we publish. Housing home homelessness, and the one that we want is the children and families. So this is the first one. So if you're sort of like a data nerd like me, and if you want to look at the metadata, if you go down to the bottom, you do have the Aboriginal-led data sharing metadata. They give you a link to the Aristotle, and give you a brief summary of all the measures that we do or publish, and also with the definitions behind that. Okay, to access the dashboard, you just click on this link. Okay. So So this is a kind of like a landing screen of that. I know that it's quite wordy and it's quite a lot, but everything is the 5 core is solely based centered on the 5 core elements of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Child Placement Principle. So it's got links to every single theme. So I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but I just want to showcase what data is available. So for example, if you go to the prevention, which is our first one, you go into this dashboard. So here, so list of the prevention measures that, kind of measures related to prevention. We do have the risk of significant harm reports by primary helpline assess issues, children at ROSH, and you do have the population rates of this child protection system. There are kind of filters here, which will dynamically change the data as you see fit. So for example, if you do want to look at 2022-23, you can filter this. All the things would change dynamically, of course. And if you're only interested in Aboriginal children and young people, you can do that as well. And then this is by the districts. And then you can actually choose whatever districts that's relevant to you. So everything will change accordingly. This one here is a useful tool as well if you don't want to look at the primary helpline assess issues. You can do it, up to 1 or 8, the way that you see fit, whatever is suitable for your analysis. And then if you actually click on this link, so what we will actually go is present that in a time series. So you can see that this is actually risk of significant harm and children at ROSH and children seen, and over the years goes back to 10 years back. So it's actually quite a useful thing to look at when you're interested in trend analysis as such. Okay, so you can go back to this page. You can go back to the home screen if you want to go back straight away. So it's easy to navigate. And I'm going to just show you another theme, which is placement. So this one here, of course, it's related to children out of home care. There is a population rate of these children in out of home care system. There's a Aboriginal children in the type of Aboriginal caregiver and a particular district or New South Wales, if you want. And this is the Aboriginal placement principle. And if you click on this link or icon, it'll give you a bit of time series too. Okay, so I'm just kind of saving the last, the good bit to the last. So if you go to the landing page here, so this is the newest addition that we introduced to this dashboard. Oh, just one second. Sorry, I think I've pressed the wrong one. Sorry, this is actually to other links to access the other Aboriginal related dashboard. So that actually goes you back to the DCJ statistics. So to access the Aboriginal Land Council regions, you have to click on this one. Okay, so, this is the right one. So as I mentioned before, there were about 10 measures that we actually included in this new edition. There's a bit of a year that you can actually select it for and for which Aboriginality that you want. So this ranges from the risk of significant harm and all the way to the children on guardianship orders. So for example, if I'm interested in the number of children seen, because I think that's a really important aspect in the child protection system, is that whenever a child is reported at ROSH, we want them to be seen. And if you're locally sort of living in these communities, you may be interested in looking at the data that's related to your community. So I'm going to choose this one as an example. So we're a jury. So at the moment now at Children's Scene, you can have a look at the latest data here. So in New South Wales, for Aboriginal children who were seen, there were 7,372. And in Wiradjuri, there's 975. So if you click on that region, so what it will do is that it will give you the bit of a time series of the children who were seen in Wiradjuri region. And in this, on the right here, it's what we call it's a breakdown of that region by local Aboriginal Land Council in 2024-25, right? So let's say I'm interested in Wagga Wagga, and I click on that. And that will give you a bit of time series of the data that we have in Wagga Wagga region. So, so as you can see, this is one interesting story where in 2020-21, 266 Aboriginal children were seen in comparison to 114. So that's almost more than half in terms of the decrease, right? So this could be a very powerful and useful tool in terms of sort of developing policies around the area or doing service area, more service outlets within this region. So it will be very, very useful to the Aboriginal communities. Okay, so what we have here as well, so I'm just going to stop that. So what we have here as well is the explanatory notes. So if you click on that icon, so what we have here is links to the Family Matters report, quarterly services report on children and young people, and so on and so forth, and also the accuracy of the Indigenous status data. So to give you direct links to those websites. Okay, so without further ado, I'll pass this to Kochakon. So we're going to stop sharing. And she will actually go through the presentation of Closing the Gap. Thank you.
Thank you, Hendra. Just going to wait for a couple of seconds for the presentation to load back in. Okay. Thank you everyone for coming in over lunch. What I want to walk through today is the Closing the Gap Target 12 report, the quarterly report that FACSIAR produces on Aboriginal overrepresentation in child protection and out-of-home care. It's just a little bit of the background. So as we all know, Aboriginal people are significantly overrepresented in the DCJ service system, including the child protection, out-of-home care, and even the justice system. And that's what this report is trying to make visible, focusing on the child protection and out-of-home care. So FACSIAR has produced this internally every quarter for a couple of years under the name the Aboriginal Overrepresentation Dashboard, being reported to the executive leadership team, but it's actually never been available externally before. That's now changed. It's live on the DCJ website, updated every quarter. So I have the link here, and I think Sajib will paste the link into the chat as well. So publishing the report just mattered for a few reasons. It improved transparency, strengthened DCJ accountability for progress against the target, and also meet our information sharing agreement by giving Aboriginal community members and organizations the same timely data we use to make decisions. So now straight into the headline indicator. This is actually the actual Closing the Gap Target 12 measure. So it is the rate of Aboriginal children in out-of-home care per 1,000 population. So as at March 2026, the rate is 45.3, slightly up from the previous quarter. However, even though the report doesn't show, but when we look back to the baseline in June 2019, the rate was 50.3, and the 2031 target is 27.7, which is a 45% reduction of the baseline. we have the grey line, the dark grey line here, which is called trajectory to target. The way this is being calculated is that we look at the baseline and then we assume linear reduction from the baseline to reach the 27.7 target in 2031. So now, as you can see, for the past 2 years, from June 24, the rate has been, say, between 45.0 and 45.3. So it's quite stable. But the trajectory for us to meet the target, it expects us to keep the rate reducing. And as you can see, the gap is widening from looking at, say, back in June 24 and March 26. So behind the rate, maybe this slide will be a little bit easier to understand because now we translate the rate into the actual number. So if we remember, the rate was 50.3 as at March 2026. When we look at the number, it's actually 6,376 Aboriginal children in out-of-home care. So again, it's up slightly, and we still need to reduce the number of Aboriginal children in out-of-home care further by 1,090 children to actually meet the trajectory. And again, like it's the same point as the last slide, but just showing you the concrete number. This slide actually summarized the whole report in one place. We walked through each stage in the child protection and out-of-home care system. So of all children reported at risk of significant harm, 21% were Aboriginal children. Then 33% of all children seen were Aboriginal. 48% of all children who entered out-of-home care were Aboriginal, and then 44% exited out-of-home care, with 39% of permanency exit. So the point to take from this slide is that when you really think about it, Aboriginal children actually only 3 to 4%, making up 3 to 4% of the New South Wales child population. So as you can see, even at the starting point of the system, they already overrepresented. So 21% of all children reported at WASH were Aboriginal children. And then it keeps increasing when they get deeper into the system, like say when they were seen, and peak at entries. Now we'll go through each measure in a little bit more detail, showing you the 2-year quarterly trend of each measure. So we're starting off with the risk of significant harm. So in the 12 months to March 2026, there's around, say, 25,000 Aboriginal children who were reported at WASH, slightly up from the previous quarter and also slightly up from the previous year. The proportion, though, is easing slightly. So you can see 22.2% here, and it's kind of slowly going down to 21.3%. However, I wouldn't really read too much into this measure because, say, as we all know, like a lower reporting share doesn't really mean fewer Aboriginal children are experiencing risk of harm. It just means that fewer reports are being met. So it's just something that we need to keep an eye on. Now, after the children seen, the proportion of Aboriginal children who were seen of all children remained quite stable across the 2 years. So sitting around 33, 34%. Next point into the system is the entries into out-of-home care. It is the entry point into the system. So in the 12 months to March 2026, 978 Aboriginal children entered out-of-home care. So it also slightly went up comparing to the previous quarter, and also slightly went up comparing to the previous year. What I wanted to note is that their proportion, though, start off at 46 in June 24, and then it's kind of increased up to the point of the peak of 51% in June 25. And now it's reducing a little bit, but Aboriginal children still are being overrepresented in the number of entries. Next one is children in out-of-home care. So this is actually the same measure as the headline Closing the Gap Target 12 measure. But under this section, we're actually trying to show the non-Aboriginal student part of thing, and we also want to show the actual proportion of Aboriginal students in out-of-home care. Even though it's quite a slow increasing, but you can see that the proportion actually increased from say 45, and then it's kind of up a little each of the quarter, and now it's 47%. The next measure is the Aboriginal student in out-of-home care and caregiver relationship. So this one is a subset of the previous measure. So now we're looking at where Aboriginal children are being placed. Around 70% of Aboriginal children are placed with kinship carer or with an Aboriginal carer. So this has remained stable for the past 2 years, and it reflects the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander child placement principle working in practice. The next part is exiting out-of-home care. So if you remember, the proportion of entry is slightly higher than the proportion of exit. So on the exit side of things, from the 12th month to March 2026, around 1,021 Aboriginal children exited out-of-home care, slightly down from the previous quarter and slightly down from the previous year. And the proportion stayed quite steady between, say, 42 to 44%. Now that we actually covered both entries and exit, it's actually worth putting them side by side, because when you think about it, the driver of the number of children in out-of-home care is the entries and exit. If we want to reduce the number of Aboriginal children in out-of-home care, we would want the exit number to exceed the entries. So that's the mechanism behind the steady rate, because the entries increase slightly while the exit actually decrease slightly. Now looking at the permanency exit, which is the best outcome for children. So the proportion actually improved to 39%, comparing climbing up from June 24 from 36% to now 39%. But the number actually reduced, but it's reduced for both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal children. Then we have restoration, which is subset of the permanency exit, and then also guardianship. And then we have a slide on the high cost emergency arrangement. So I might go through this too. You might be able to see the preliminary data here. So these will be finalized once we get the June 2026 data. We also, in the actual report, if you're interested, we also have each of the different type of HCEA, for example, like IPA, ACA, etc. if you want to see the same trend for those placements. And to bring it all together, I think the key focus is that we know that Aboriginal students are overrepresented in the system, and CHAP is at the entry into care. So even though the rate of Aboriginal students in out-of-home care isn't getting worse, but by being steady, it already mean we gonna have to work harder to try to meet the 2031 target. Thank you. I'll now pass back on to Jess.
Thank you so much, Coach Korn, Hendra and Maelona. Really interesting and important presentations. And so I might just turn now to, there's been a number of comments around how fantastic it is to have data now presented by local Aboriginal Land Council boundaries. So a big congratulations to everyone involved in making that happen. I don't know that there are many other data that are publicly available by those boundaries. So a really important advancement for DCJ. There is a question. There's one question here. Is the data measured from June 2019 for the overrepresentation? I think that's for target 12, Coach Korn.
Yeah, in the report, it's only showing the 2-year trend. But if you're interested in looking at it from the 2019, you can actually access the PC website or the Closing the Gap website. They will show an annual trend from 2019.
Excellent, thank you. And there's a question for Hendra here. And please, to everyone else, please, if you do have questions and comments, put them in the chat. We have some time to turn to those. There's a question for Hendra. What is the difference in the measure Roche reports? 9,877 for Wiradjuri in 2025, for example, to children and young people in Roche. Does it suggest 3 reports per child?
I would say yes.
Yes. So
yes.
do you want to describe the difference between how we measure
so,
just Roche reports versus Roche per child
yes,
or children at Roche?
Yes. So number of Roche reports, that's the number of risk of significant harm reports that were reported during the year. And the children at Roche. So the thing about children at Roche, the way that we public is it's subject to accounting rules. So basically, if the child were reported at Roche and was seen, so we are actually looking at that particular district or council, these local Aboriginal local council boundaries. If they're not seen, then we look at the first Roche where it occurred. So just mind you that when we actually sort of convert this, we have to actually use the residential postcode of the location at contact. And then we use this concordance to map accordingly to where that Roche occurred or where the children were at that time when the incident occurred. So technically speaking, what you're saying is correct. So if you have 1,000 reports for that particular area, and it's 100 people, so on average is about 10 reports per person.
Thank you. There's now another question here with regards to the data presented by local Aboriginal Land Council, where the numbers are small. How do we deal with privacy? Do we use perturbation or other ways to protect privacy?
Yeah, so all the dashboards we look at suppressing those data, which is less than 5. So pretty much, I probably haven't gone through the example of those smaller ones, but if you actually click on any particular area, what it will do is actually suppress it and put it as not published. So you can't actually see or identify any individuals who are living in those areas.
Thank you. And Maelona, I thought it might be helpful. Sorry, I know you're not entirely well today, but just in case there are people, communities, organisations out there that are interested in using our data connector service, how they go about contacting you and just the types of data that we provide. So de-identified, is it aggregated, unit record, that sort of thing?
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be great. More requests would be lovely. I think Sajeev has put the link in the chat where you can see some more information on our website about the service, and we've also got contact information on there. And there's really most of the requests that I've received are for aggregate data. Unit record data is something you can request, but there's a bit more of a strenuous process in making sure privacy is protected, and there's a few more steps to get through with unit record data. But the one thing I will say is you don't have to have a big have a data request that's all formal and you know what you want. I think there's value in just having the yarn and talking about what are the priorities in your community, what's important, what are the issues that you're looking at, and from there, from that yarn, saying what data we might have to be able to support those priorities. So don't think that, in contacting you need to have some fully fleshed out requests. We can work through that together. But yes, the link is somewhere amidst the other links that Sajeev has put at the top of the chat.
That's great. Thanks, May. I agree. important that people know that there are experts like all of you on the end of the line to talk through what data we have and how that might be able to meet people's needs. So you don't need to know everything about DCJ data to form a data request. We're absolutely here to help. There's another question here, re some of your slides. Oh, it's just a sec. Where's it gone? Oh no, have I already done that one? Oh, no, hang on. Could you take us through again on navigating the local Aboriginal Land Council data on the dashboard? There were so many indicators, it was a bit hard to capture that, only if we have time. We do have time. Do you want to spend just a couple of minutes, Hendra, to bring it up to show what indicators are on the dashboard?
Yeah, just give me 1 second. Okay. Okay, so that's the landing page. So if you click on this icon there. So mind you, this is available publicly to everyone. So if you go to the DCJ website, which I showed you, and navigate through, you can definitely have a look at this in your own time as well. So what we have here is a measure here. Just go through the details and read this out. So resource significant harm reports. So that's the total number of ROSH reports by these regions, as well as local Aboriginal Land Councils. The children at ROSH, so that's the children count, children seen, children entering out of home care, children and young people entering out of home care for the first time, children and young people exiting out of home care, children and young people in out of home care, Aboriginal placement principle, children and young people in statutory care, and children and young people on guardianship orders. So I think probably 90% of this is kind of in the closing of the gap that 12 that Coachcon has mentioned before. So there's definitely some headline measures and very useful measures for this. So if you want me to, because I think I've gone through the children's scene one. So if you want to, so I can go through the Aboriginal placement principle, because that's quite an interesting thing as well. So as you can see, when I do select on that, so everything here is based on the Aboriginal placement principle. So New South Wales is 70% there, which is a headline number or percentage. Obviously, Aboriginal placement principle, if you've got non-Aboriginal children, you would probably don't have that information, which is right. Then you can choose the year that you are interested in. So if you go 2023, those numbers will change as directed. So this time around, I'm going to go to another region, which is Western. So if you click on that Western region, so 79.4%. So this is actually higher than the New South Wales, which is really good. And you can see that it actually improved throughout the years from 2021 to 2025. That's a great sign. And if you go to any of these local Aboriginal Land Council, it's 82.8%, which is actually better than the region overall, right? So if you hover these charts along this, it'll give you a bit of information as well as to what it actually meant and what the measure is. And I think someone mentioned about data suppression, right? So I might just go to one where it's the data could be small. So let's go to entering out of home care for the first time. Okay. Okay. So you can see that this is central. You get about 12, right? So if there is 20 local Aboriginal Land Council in that central area, for it to have an overall of 12, then you could expect that the numbers will be small in those smaller areas. So I'll just try to prove my point here. So, well, okay. So entering for the first time, this is actually quite good, that, it actually decreased by quite a lot, right, since 2021. And it was 53 in 2021 and down to 12, so which is a significant improvement. And you can see here that some of this local Aboriginal Land Council area has got not published. So which means that the data is less than 5, right? So double itself is 7. So let me have a look at that. So, yep, so there is data over than 5. So what we can see is that there might be some cases where it's less than 5 this year, but it's actually 5 or 6 last previous year. So you could actually see the trend there being that, in 2003-4 could be 6 and then not published there. So there is some evidence that is actually working. So let me look at the not published one. Okay, so this is an example here. When 2021, this Mudgee has got 9 Aboriginal children and young people who entered out of home care for the first time. And subsequently, 4 years after that, it's actually less than 5. Okay. If you want to know in comparison to non-Aboriginal people, you can do that. So I'm just going to choose the non-Aboriginal children in the filter. So in Mudgee at that time, you actually don't have, it's actually lesser than Aboriginal people, right? You can see that if it's by Aboriginal Land Councils and these regions, probably you will see some measures like this, is that the Aboriginal children tends to be, has got more significant than non-Aboriginal children. And with, children entering out of home care for the first time is around 49%. You can definitely see some of these regions that's got a stronger growth or increases for these measures. I hope that's enough. So I might just stop sharing. Yeah. No
Thanks, Hendra. That's fantastic. So as Hendra mentioned, that dashboard and all of our other dashboards publicly available, so you can go in there and have a look yourself. So thank you all again so much. I might, before we close off, just ask each of you, as we do for all of our presenters at the end of our lunch and learns, if there was one take-home message that you would like everyone that's listened today to take home, what would it be? And I'll start with you, Hendra.
Oh, okay. I thought you start with Maelona.
I go backwards.
Yeah, okay. So I really enjoy the slides, and I think there is interconnectedness between our team, that actually we're trying to actually solve a big issue currently at New South Wales, which is to reduce overrepresentation. So I know that Maelona has actually reached out to us in terms of her role as a data connector. And a lot of organizations has been asking, different types of questions about Aboriginal data. And subsequently, when we produce the data, then Kochikan's team would actually use that to analyze in a quarterly fashion. So I think, it brings us together, and we just have a common goal to actually try to resolve this by giving data evidence for this informed decision making throughout the process.
Thank you. Kochikan?
Yep, so my takeaway would be that, as we all can see, Aboriginal children, they are overrepresented in the child protection and out-of-home care system. And even though the rate of Aboriginal children in out-of-home care hasn't really increased, but by it not decrease, it means that we need to actually put in more effort. So that's something to keep in mind of. Thank you.
Thank you. So important to focus on exits as well as entries. Thank you. And Maelona?
I think my key takeaway is just, I think we've really made like an innovative step in being able to include and partner with Newswalk in being able to incorporate those boundaries that are actually relevant to community and more meaningful to the ways in which our communities see and organise themselves, and being able to see data in a local level that's recognisable and meaningful to your community. I think it's a big step for Aboriginal communities being able to use the data on the publicly available data. I think it's a really massive step.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. I think it's really important to be able to see that local level information for service planning, for advocating, and for policy design as well at the local level. And there's lots of similar comments coming through for those working with ACOs and in the justice reinvestment space and others. So thank you all again for your presentations. Everyone that's registered, you'll receive an email with the link to the recording of this webinar. You're more than happy, able to share that across your networks. We'll also provide links to the resources that we've spoken about today and other relevant resources. Please have a look at those. And if you have any further questions or comments, you'll see in the chat too our email address at researchpartnerships@dcj. So please shoot us an email if you have other questions that you wanted to ask. But if not, we would also like to invite you to our next Lunch and Learn, which will be held at midday on the 17th of September. The next one is quite an interesting topic called Using Life Story Work to Support Children and Young People in Out-of-Home Care. Hope you'll be able to join us for that one. And thank you again, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.